If you are a manager, listen to this. My strong recommendation is stop this desire to know everything that an IC knows. It's not realistic. Your job is not that. Your job is to amplify other people's work. Be a multiplier of your team. Your knowledge workers know more than you do. So instead of telling them how to solve, ask them good questions. See how you can help them. You bring your value as a manager, so don't discount that. At the same time, don't try to be the expert IC on your team. You're not. If you really want to be an IC, you can always go back. You can switch the ladder, go back as an IC. That's totally respectable. But if you are a manager, stay as a manager. Thank you, Masood. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you for the folks who liked the episode and the person who actually told you that he liked the episode. The reason is all of us have this imposter syndrome. I'm no different. So when I go to these podcasts, I'm always thinking, who will get the value from these podcasts? How do I add value to the listeners? It's always great to hear from people that they like the episode. So I thank you and folks who are listening.
Awesome. Thank you for being so kind and participating multiple episodes with us. So please feel free to share what is the main story you want to share in this part 2.
One thought that came to my mind as we finished the last episode, I really want to ensure we take one step ahead and talk about my biggest challenge as an engineer. I briefly mentioned this in the previous episode. Effective communication was my challenge. I would love to talk about how did I overcome that challenge, process that I went through, and what I teach now to my clients and students through my courses. I have a course called Communication Engineering, which is, tailoring your communication based on the audience. I would love to talk about some principles from the course so people don't have to pay and come to the course and still get benefit from those ideas through this video.
Awesome. The floor is yours. Please start basically I think you mentioned 4 topics, but please feel free to start the conversation and I will have my questions at the end of each topic.
Yeah, before I go to the course and the solution part, I'll take a couple of minutes to talk about the challenge part. As I mentioned in the previous episode, I am a non-native English speaker. English is my third language. That has significantly impacted my confidence in my engineering career. When I went to meetings in 2002 and 2003, I'm talking about 21 years ago, I had all these wonderful ideas with product managers and other people in the room. I could not speak up because of my language gap. Luckily, I went to Toastmasters, and people who have not yet have heard about this or not have experienced it, I strongly recommend doing it. It's like a laboratory for your communication. You can go experiment and learn from how you communicate and get feedback from that. So for about 3 years, I went to the Toastmaster Club. As a participant, I spoke in many events and many speeches. I learned a lot of ideas. And a couple of things I want to share with people is, I changed only by speaking. A lot of people read books. A lot of people take courses. And I recommend they are good. They give you a lot of tools. But communication is just like building your muscles. You can buy the highest quality equipments on the internet, on Amazon, but you cannot build muscles by watching the dumbbells. You have to lift the dumbbells. The same thing applies to your communication skill, whether it is written or spoken. You have to communicate. You have to experiment with ideas and get feedback from people, how these changes are actually helping you and helping them understand your message. This was the biggest recommendation I have for people. And some people say it is expensive in terms of time. They don't have 2 hours every week to go to a club meeting and learn from Toastmasters. There are other ways of doing it. You find a buddy of yours who is interested and practice these things. But there is no substitute for practice. You decide where you practice or when do you want to practice. That's up to you. But there is no alternative for better communication other than practicing it with somebody you know. So I'll stop there in terms of the challenge part and how I solved it. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer now.
In terms of the Toastmaster, I also had good experiences in the past. The challenges that I have faced sometimes is I have seen and I have worked with basically colleagues who, I have seen 2 challenges. One is the time constraint. like going to the Toastmasters, they might not have enough visibility about like the benefit that they can get from those practices. The second challenge is for example, in demanding companies or startups, that environments, they don't have that much time or energy for basically like spending some time. How you can create a picture that in, like, for example, in long time, it will have some benefits for the time that they have put aside for those practices.
I think it's just like health, right? So everybody wants to be fit and healthy, but they don't have time to work out. It's the same story. So shortage of time is never a problem. It's about prioritization. In my experience for the 22 years now, I think it's always comes to prioritization. Can you prioritize what's important to you? All of us can get some time during the week. One thing I understand is going to meeting in person could be a challenge. But now many clubs are meeting on Zoom. There are many clubs around the world where you can go to Zoom meetings and still communicate with them. So I don't think in-person meeting is really required. You can always go to online meetings. And they usually run from 60 minutes to 90 minutes once a week. Sometimes they meet once in 2 weeks. So you decide how frequently you want to go. But I don't see any substitute for this in terms of your polished communication. You can come to my course. I run a 4-week course. You get a lot of these ideas and implement those ideas during the 4 weeks. That's another thing called crash course. You can get that. I took a lot of learnings from my Toastmaster journey for about 17 years. I put all of that into one course, which is 4 weeks. But even then, if you learn some ideas in those 4 weeks, you have to go back and continue implementing those ideas at your workplace. Any meeting you go to. Even if you see today, I'm doing my best to ensure whatever I teach in the course, I'm implementing those as I talk. I will explain it as we go further into those ideas. I'm not simply preaching something. I am attempting to practice consciously whatever I teach in the course.
Awesome. One of the follow-up question is, how do you create this picture of long-term investment? So with some examples that you have from your own stories or the stories of your students, so how long you can bring some stories that it pays off, like either it could be financial, like if other like engineers want to take these courses, it would be cost of financials and cost of the time. How long normally takes to see the benefits? It could be like the promotions or changing to a role that is higher salary. So it would be great if you can share some of those stories as well.
I will share one example. I will not take the person's name. I will not take the company's name. This person is actually currently interviewing at Meta. So it's interesting, software engineering. And I will tell you, this person is currently leveled at E5. Now he has all the experience and technical chops for an E6. I will tell you, he has all the technical chops as an E6. But he knows he's my client, and I know, we both know that he has to step up in his communication skill. Now you know you are at Meta. You can go to levels.fii and figure out the salary band, the total comp for E5 and the total comp for E6. There is a significant difference. So the question to folks who are listening is, if you know, you go right now, after this video, you watch the video, go to levels.fii, check the salary band of E5 and E6 at Meta. And now ask a question to yourself, does it make sense to invest your time and effort in communication skill? If that's the gap, whatever thousands of dollars is the gap every year, does it make sense to invest in your communication and leadership skills? If the answer is no, I don't think you need to improve. I don't think you need to invest in the long run. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely, yeah. You answered absolutely. So it has happened for me many times. So at the beginning, I have thought maybe like investing like $1,000 in this mock interview or coaching session or this course or that course, is it worth like spending $1,000 now that I'm basically like jobless or layoff? And so my answer is, as you mentioned, simple. It is very easy to check. Like if you go to a higher level at companies like Meta, or if you go from for example, from a startup to a big tech company, which these are the major steps and necessary steps, as you mentioned, these investments are necessary. So there is no brainer for me to spend $1,000 to have a salary increase of like $50,000. So it's, if I see the future benefits, how significant those are, that will become no brainer for me. Then thank you for sharing that. And then, yeah, I very much agree on that one.
Also look at this, right? I think with all these AI and other advancement happening, I think there is more need for people who can communicate well. I think everybody has the technical jobs now, the foundations, by the way. I'm talking about the foundations. So how is the difference then if 3 people are interviewing during the process? If all of them have the same technical skills, same engineering background, they've got really good algorithmic skills, what differentiates between them is how do they communicate? How do they collaborate? How do they articulate an idea to the other person who may have a different background? Maybe they are talking to a product manager. Can they flexibly change their style of communicating so that the other person can grasp the idea? Otherwise, software engineering and data engineering is a team sport, right? You work as a team to solve a problem together. It's not in silo. So communication is required not only for your career advancement and making more money, but also having a fulfilling career, a meaningful career, because you are making a huge impact. And the impact comes through collaborating and communicating.
Absolutely. And then communication, and you added collaboration as well. And also we'll talk about like collaboration, partnership, between the cross-functional teams, between your own team, conflict resolution. These are different pieces of the puzzle of bigger umbrella of leadership and communication. I have experienced myself, my friends, teammates, exactly similar patterns, that spending some time on these aspects, these are non-technical aspects, we have heard soft skills, pays off hugely. The examples that you mentioned.
I just wish, sorry to interrupt, I just wish they rename soft skills to life skills. Because everybody needs this. They're actually not really soft skills. I call them as life skills. Because, what you learn in these ways to communicate, they also are applicable to your other relationships in life. How to handle conflict. For example, how do I talk to my son? If I don't know how to talk, how to handle conflicts. That is applicable everywhere, not only at work, but at home as well.
Again, 100% agree. We are watching with my wife a good, basically TV series. There is the depths of basically like the drama that people have in their relationships, in their life. It reminds me of basically conflict resolution. Like in this movie, we are seeing like the conflict that is between like the husband and wife, or husband, boy or girl in a relationship. It's more or less similar to like the patterns are similar in terms of like the conflicts at work. So if we know like the middle ground, compromise, conflict resolution, we are getting off the track. I apologize for that one, but as you mentioned, it is life skills. So it's very, very important. Thank you for sharing that.
And if you remember, I would love to come back to this later, conflict. I talk about the 4-week program. In 3rd week, we talk a lot about how the fiction in your mind creates friction in relationships. Maybe we can come back to that later, because we are jumping ahead. I don't want to jump.
Yeah, I don't want to jump either. Let's go back to the communication, up a skill for engineers, what are the common mistakes or challenges that you have faced in real life working with so many basically engineers? And please share more stories.
Yeah. I would bucket them into 4 areas. And I'm not simply saying it because I teach a course. I have close to 22 years in the industry. As an IC for 6 years, then a manager, then a workshop facilitator at Oracle, helping so many other engineers and managers, and finally at Meta, and now as an independent coach and business owner. I see the same 4 areas that are gaps for both individual contributors and managers, especially in the technical world. When I say technical world, they are applicable to PPM roles, maybe PM roles, other data engineering roles. Doesn't matter. Don't worry too much about the function. But anybody in the world of technology have these 4 areas to look at. Now, one is, I call it as standing tall with effective communication. Now, the word tall is an acronym. In fact, it's a backronym because we have a word and we made an acronym out of it. It's called backronym with a B in front. So the first one is talking with effectiveness and conciseness, T. The biggest challenge I have seen with engineers especially is they're verbose. They know a lot of details. They think, I need to give all the details to this person. So there is less conciseness, there is more details. It could be useful if you're talking to another engineer at your level, totally fine, because you're both geeks and you can geek out, no problem. But when you talk to your manager, maybe VP of engineering or director or a product management, you need to think about how am I communicating. There is a quote I learned long ago called, communication is the response you get. Communication is the response you get. So it doesn't matter how I am communicating. The point is, are they understanding? Is the other person understanding what I am saying? Are they on the same page? That is more important. So the first area to work on is, can you be effectiveness? Can you be effective as well as concise and short in your communication? One of the techniques I teach in this area, first area, is called S3 approach. It is not Amazon S3, by the way. S3 is short, simple, and structured. Short, simple, and structured. Whenever you open your mouth and communicate, somebody asks you a question, hey, what's happening in this area, in this project? Tell me more. So I always think about these 3. Can you keep it simple? No jargons, simple words. Can you keep it short? Not too long, really short. And lastly, can you use a structure to communicate? We can talk about structures later, but structured communication helps people to remember information as well as understand what is communicated. One example could be, what happened? Why does it matter? What next? In other words, what, so what, and now what? It's a very simple structure, but if I communicate what happened is this, so what, why does it matter is this, and now what action we should be taking to solve this. That's one structure to think about. So that's talking with effectiveness and conciseness. The second one is asking questions. A lot of people don't know how to ask questions. That's the biggest challenge. They make great statements. They give long paragraph answers, but they don't know how to ask questions. The other one is not only how to ask questions, your tonality matters. Like, how are you coming across? Are you coming across as an interrogator, like a cop asking question? Or you're showing curiosity when you ask question? Super important. For example, when you're asking somebody why question, why did this happen? Your tone matters, as well as the question why itself may not be the right question, because you have this mentality that something is wrong with the decision. So you're asking why. In place of that, you could ask, what's the rationale behind that decision? You made this choice. What's your reasoning? So you tell me, if I ask you why versus what's your reasoning, what feels more appealing to you?
So it was a question for me.
Yes.
Okay, so same thing. Basically, I really like to engage the curiosity, and also I want to go back to the previous one as well. That was my and I want to do this structure in my answering. Like, what happened when you talk in the past 4 or 5 minutes, why it matters, and now what? I want to use this one. So you talked about the S3: short, simple, and structure. A few years back, I had struggled with this one. I didn't know what is my basically communication challenges. This is the one that you mentioned is short, simple, and structured and concise was my challenge. I didn't know that I'm talking too much as an engineer to someone from business. Why it is important? Because like now that I'm looking back, I see that some of the failures, the result for those failures were not technical. I could trace it back to my lack of a skill in concise and short and simple communication. Now what? Moving forward, I have seen improvement in my basically concise and short and simple communication, even in podcasts, comparing to my first episodes. But there is a long way to go for being able to articulate as a host of a podcast, short, simple, and concise. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help. The other challenge with questions, most of these people ask, there are two types of question. One is called as closed question, where the answer is yes or no. Did you have breakfast this morning? Yes or no, right? Or did you like this podcast? Yes or no? Most people are great at yes or no question. What we need to learn is the other question, which is open-ended questions, which is, 4WH. What, where, how, when. And these questions are really important. So when you master the art of asking questions, I recommend people start looking at open-ended questions where people have to think and respond. For instance, if I ask you a question, so far in the discussion, tell me 3 things you liked about the conversation. That is an open-ended question. I'm inviting you to share 3 things you liked in our conversation so far. The closed question can be, did you like the conversation so far? Yes or no? I will not know what's happening in your mind with a closed question. I can learn a lot about you and your way of thinking by open-ended questions. This is not easy. We don't get these skills. We don't get a class on communication. Even people who get it, they don't learn and they don't practice it. That is why I teach this in the course. How do you ask questions with curiosity and empathy so that the other person knows that you are curious to know? You are not judgmental. You are not superior because you're asking questions. You are genuinely curious to know the other side of the story and connect the dots. The analogy I give people is this. Imagine you and I and 3 other people. We are blindfolded and now we go touch the elephant at different parts. All of us are blindfolded. I touch the trunk, you touch the tail, somebody else touches the leg, somebody else touches the elephant's body. Now, each of them say they are different things. And we cannot argue with them because, yes, they are right. They are touching a different part of the elephant and they are blindfolded. Same thing happens in organizations. People come from different backgrounds. They're from product, data engineering, software engineering, data science, TPM function, maybe marketing, sales, finance, privacy, legal team. They all have their own background, which means they come from different part of the elephant. They know the partial truth, not the whole truth. Only by asking good questions, showing empathy, curiosity, and listening, now they're touching the tail here. It's not a broomstick, it's a tail. It's not a spear, it's tusk, elephant's tusk. This can come through really good questions and listening to their answers. So we covered, the first one was talking with effectiveness and conciseness with structures. Second theme was asking insightful questions. Any questions on these two so far? If not, I will go to the next one, which is listening.
The question basically I have is the stories or the strategies that you share, very important. I have so many good experiences and bad experiences that I have learned with these 2 topics. The first one that I mentioned before, the second one is basically empathy an understanding of the point of view from different people with different backgrounds. It could be from a business team, as you mentioned, or product manager or design person, and being able to look at holistically when you're communicating or building this collaboration. The challenge or the question that now I have is, before we are going to the next topic, is imagine that you're a manager and you're responsible for leading a team of 5. How it would be your communication style, being effective and talking direct topics, like providing direct feedback, if the performance of some team members is not as good as you would expect in those situations.
I see. Just to clarify the question, you have a situation where you want me to act as a manager and say, how do I provide feedback on performance?
This is the first part. The second part is like, imagine that your engineer, your manager is basically like expecting something that is unrealistic. So both sides. So in these 2 scenarios, how would you apply the 2 strategies that you have explained so far?
Yeah. I mean, let's look at the first one, which is me being the manager. Let's say somebody who is listening to this podcast or watching it, if they are a manager and they want to give feedback, number 1 tip is please give it in private, not in public. Most people still do the mistake. It has to be private. Any feedback you offer or growth, improvement, it is always private. Now, the second question is when you start giving this feedback, there are so many ways to do it. Because we are not trained in giving feedback, I will give you one of the models I teach in my course. There are so many other models for giving feedback. We talk about this in our week 3 workshop. In our week 3, Masood, we actually do exercise together. People go to breakout rooms and they take a mock situation and they give feedback to someone else saying, okay, here is what you are lacking today in this area of performance and I want you to improve. How can I help you? So we do this mock conversation for each week's theme. One of the models we use is a COIN model. It's also very popular at Meta, I know, COIN. What was the context? What was the observation? What is the impact of this behavior? And next steps, COIN. What's the context of this feedback? What observation I made, not my feelings, but my clear observations about your behavior. What's the impact of this behavior to you, to me, and the team, and the organization, and the product? What are the next steps? Where I explore with you, here is my observation. I may be wrong. You can correct me as an employee, as an engineer on my team, because I gave you my perspective. So when you have this framework, what happens is your emotions are in control now. You have a flow to go. Otherwise, what happens is you randomly start a topic and give feedback. They rebut. You get agitated. You rebut back. This doesn't work. When you have a clear framework, start with the context. You could say, in our last meeting, I saw that you were interrupting other people. 3 times. I noticed that 3 people were speaking. You went in between and you spoke something, you interrupted. I saw this 3 times. So I gave you the context, I gave you the observation. The impact of that is people think you are not listening to them. It gives a wrong impression that you are a senior person in the team. It gives them an impression that you don't listen well and you have all the ideas. You don't want them to share their ideas. This will bring the team morale down. The juniors in the team may not like it. They don't think there is growth in the team. That's the impact. Next steps. What do you think about this observation? Were you aware of this behavior you made last time in the meeting? Or is it something I noticed? What am I missing here? Please help me understand. Now, if I come with that frame to you, Masood, would you feel bad? Would you feel angry at me?
If I'm a person that I'm seeking for growth and improvement, absolutely I will feel like in a safe environment that is private, as you mentioned, you're providing me the things that I can improve. I will be very happy.
Yeah. Or maybe the other person may say, hey, I wasn't aware. Actually, I was so passionate about the topic, I just didn't realize that. I was coming across as somebody who doesn't listen. It is not that somebody is intentionally not listening. In the heat of the moment, they are so focused on their goal, their objective, to prove them right, prove others wrong. They may have missed it, the other person. But I am giving them an opportunity to revert and say, hey, here is my perspective. And the next steps is what happens next? Now, how do we resolve this going forward? Or if I see you doing it again, how can I help you? What behavioral triggers we can set in the meeting so that should I interrupt you in between? Should I say, okay, let them finish and then you can start? I'm happy to do it as a manager. But let's work on this together. Let's agree that next time either this doesn't happen, or if it happens, how do we navigate and come back to the listening mode where everybody feels safe in the team to share their perspective? Because psychological safety is critical for a team. Any questions?
One of the great common pattern of communication that I've experienced from my managers, great managers, is how can I help? Instead of criticizing or blaming this happened, how can I help to improve? Masood, how can I help to improve your focus, your productivity, or some examples? It could be anything. But how can I help provide totally different impact in engineers' performance and mental health at the same time that you as a manager trying to basically improve their performance, improve their well-being and productivity and all those things. So really great basically wisdom you shared in the past few examples. Let's go to the third topic.
So the third theme we have, which is in third week, called listening deeply to go beyond words. The biggest challenge I have seen, this is for all human beings, by the way, not only engineers. I'm not saying engineers are need to focus on this. It's everybody actually. We don't listen well. We are not trained to listen. We hear people. We hear what they say, but we don't listen to what they say. It's an art. It comes by practice. You see, in any conversation, I'll give you a challenge, or anybody who is watching this, tomorrow is Monday, or any day after you watch this episode, go to a meeting and notice people. They are not listening. They are waiting for the opportunity to respond immediately. They're just waiting, when is the next pause? And when the next pause comes, I'm going to go ahead and give my answer. When you are anticipating for the opportunity to answer, you are hardly listening. You are not getting the message across. Now, the other challenge is most people go by words. They just go by what is being said. But there is a lot being said in their tonality. How are they speaking? Their tone of voice, their body language. There is so much you can listen through other parts of their communication engine together, which is their body, their voice and tonality, their eye contact, and so many other things. This is the art we need to develop. If somebody is passionately trying to communicate something, we don't need to stop them. We can become more curious. And I teach a framework called AMP2, which is AMPP. So you can show your listening skills, you can improve your listening skills by doing one of these four things, or all of these four things. Ask questions. Ask follow-up questions. Let me ask you this. You seem to be very passionate about this idea of this particular solution. Tell me why. Tell me the reason behind it, or top 3 reasons behind it. Ask more questions. And the follow-up question should be based on what they said, by the way, not randomly going to some other topic. They know you're not listening. Whatever they said, go back and say, ask more questions. Tell me more. What's the reason behind it? What makes you so passionately attached to this outcome or this approach? Why not other approaches? What have you noticed? What data have you gathered? The more questions you ask, you will realize they will fill their own gaps. Second is M, mirror. In mirroring, you repeat 2 things. You repeat whatever they are saying and say, okay, all of us use some clear technical words. We use our own verbiage. And if you can start using their own words in answering, sometimes it's very useful. They have their own words. For example, each of us have different backgrounds. If you are a product manager, you've got a different vocabulary. If you're a data scientist, you have a different vocabulary. If you're a data engineer, you have a different vocabulary. Use different technical terms. In mirroring, you start using their words because you enter their world and talk about their challenges through their own vocabulary. The other thing you do in mirroring is you tell them what you are seeing. For example, you see that they are so passionately attached to one idea and they are not willing to consider other ideas. You can simply say, it appears to me, Masood, you are already sold out to this particular approach. Am I reading it right? And you listen. What if they say, no, I'm not sold out to this approach. Tell me more ideas, I'm happy to listen. So that is mirroring. You mirror their own verbiage, their vocabulary, and you also mirror what you see. You see that they are attached to one idea. You mirror it and say, here is what I see you doing. You seem to be in a hurry. You seem to be under pressure. Am I reading it right? You seem to be under pressure to go live at any cost. Tell me about your constraints. Why are you so passionately behind this particular approach and doing it on this date? So we covered the ask part. We covered the mirroring part. The third one is called paraphrase. Paraphrasing is summarizing whatever you learned so far. In this phase of paraphrasing, you don't have to necessarily use their words. You are using your words. So let me clarify, Masood, what I heard so far. See, I said what I heard. I did not say what you said so far. Because I am hearing it, I am gathering the summary, I am putting the summary back to you and say, here is what I heard so far. Let me summarize. I heard 3 things. I know that you are passionately behind this project. You want to go live on this specific date, and you are already signed up on this particular approach. Is that summary correct? And you wait and see what they say. So you ask good questions, you go and you follow up with more questions, you mirror, and you paraphrase in your own words to summarize what you learned so far. And lastly, the prime. Prime is a technique. It's not easy. It comes through practice, more and more practice. Prime is where you see that there is something happening. They are not telling you. There is a story behind the situation here. They are not telling you, but you read the story. You are validating the story by asking a question. I'll give you an example. Let's say you and I are talking. I have a hint that you are not too comfortable with this approach. So you are simply saying yes to me because I am your manager, to please me or to be nice to me as a member of the team. And I ask you, Masood, I know in the team meeting, I somehow think that you don't like this approach. You don't really think this approach will work. And you were quiet in the meeting. I feel that there is something else you want to tell you or not telling. Is that right? This is called priming. Just like priming a pump with a little water so that more water comes later. So I'm priming Masood, telling him that, hey, here is what I think the story is. I may be wrong. But the story is you might have other approaches and you are not willing to share because of some reason. Let's talk about if there is something else, I would love for you to share. If not, that's okay. So asking good questions, following up, mirroring, paraphrasing, and priming. These are not theory, by the way. We learn theory on Tuesdays in my course. And on Thursdays, for about 60 minutes, people go to breakout rooms. They practice all these things with their partner. Sometimes one partner, sometimes 2 partners. Somebody is an observer, by the way. They're observing and making notes. What is going on well in this conversation? What could improve? I know I gave you a long answer. I'll pause here. Happy to take more questions based on AMP2 framework. Ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime.
So far, we have learned. I am especially interested in abbreviations because it simplifies and shortens the great wisdom. So the first thing that I remember is like a straight, short, simple structure. The second one was point, which is like context, observation, impact, and what next. And now AMP2, ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime. And I want to also like go back to the life skills, as opposed to I use the word like soft skill, but jokes aside, as basically life is skill. One of the things that it caught my attention is, or curiosity is, I have this question for myself. I am thinking like, what is good parenting and what's bad parenting? What I have observed is like the good parents who I really like their like the manner and behavior of their kids uses these techniques even with their kids, like with 3-year-old, 4-year-old kids. They ask questions, they mirror them, they paraphrase like reasoning, and they provide the context. These great techniques, not only like for engineers, like not only for corporation environment, but for life, it plays so critically for growing and developing like from young ages. So thank you for sharing this great wisdom. Please feel free to like continue for the next.
I want to make an observation here, Masood, that you just did the paraphrase. So I don't know if you're aware, you just did the paraphrase. You took all the core ideas we talked about, or the key ideas we talked from last 3 module, which is, TAL, talking, asking questions, and listening. You took key ideas from those 3 and you paraphrased it in your own words. That's a skill. We all can develop that skill. It's a brilliant skill. It is useful in all relationships, all communication with people. Here is what I heard. Here is my summary of whatever you said so far. You can correct me if I'm wrong. There's one more element here, Masood, that when all of us do this in meetings, in group meetings, we are showing psychological safety in action. All organizations talk about psychological safety. It's on paper, right? But this is in action. I'm showing you in action. If I do this in a meeting, here is what I learned so far from whatever you said. Correct me if I'm wrong. If all folks do it in the meeting, regardless of level, by the way, because then this is not just applicable to individual contributors. Everybody should be thinking and say, okay, here is what I learned so far. Let me paraphrase and tell you my understanding of the situation. You can correct me if I'm wrong. With this, you are not only showing your confidence, you're also showing your humility that you may be wrong in understanding. It's a brilliant combination, the combination of confidence plus humility.
100%. Humility, like showing some positive and powerful vulnerability. So there was a podcast and also a book that I was reading recently, or listening. The audiobook is exactly a combination between like confidence and also being able to show as a leader. I have seen great leaders, they share sometimes their weakness, their vulnerability, and it creates so much trust and basically trust within their teams that it motivates them to also be able to share whenever they see some weakness in their team or in the company, they're freely they share their ideas. So that's also another point that 100%, like being able to see humility and like at the same time that you have assertiveness and confidence is a great tool or a strategy.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you see all the internet articles on Medium and LinkedIn, people are bombarded with the wrong information. They think being vulnerable is a weakness. Asking help is weakness. That is not true.
Yeah.
All these articles about you need to be a 10x engineer, you need to do this. Okay, I don't know it yet. How do I get help? It's okay to ask help. Nobody's perfect in everything. Nobody knows everything. This attitude of asking help has to be promoted in organizations and say, yes, if you don't know, ask somebody. You cannot expect them to teach you for 1 hour. At least asking a question, okay, where do I find this information? I tried these things already. I'm not able to break through. How do I get help? It's okay to ask help. I wish more people practice vulnerability. In fact, it is top-down as well, because if managers don't do this, if they don't model it, people in the team think that it's not okay to be humble. It's not okay to be vulnerable. I need to know all the answers. So if you are a manager listening to this, seasoned managers know this, by the way. I don't think I need to teach them anything. It's the new managers who transition from IC to management They are the ones who have this challenge. They think they need to know everything. They should have all the answers. Otherwise, they are not good enough. In fact, Peter Drucker, I don't know if you know Peter Drucker, who is the most popular management thinker. He wrote several books in the 1980s. He's such a popular person, Peter Drucker. He talks about knowledge workers. If you look at the tech world today, everybody's a knowledge worker. Let's say you are on my team, I'm your manager. You tell me, who knows more about daily activities at Meta? Is it me or you? You know it. You know more about your area of data engineering, what you do, more than I do, because you are a knowledge worker. Now, I may know some bits of what you know, that's totally fine, but I bring other context as a manager. I bring organization context, product context, industry, and so on. Now, for me as a manager to pretend that I know everything Masood knows is a silly thing. If you are a manager, listen to this. My strong recommendation is stop this desire to know everything that an IC knows. It's not realistic. Your job is not that. Your job is to amplify other people's work. Be a multiplier of the team. Your knowledge workers know more than you do. So instead of telling them how to solve, ask them good questions. See how you can help them. You bring your value as a manager, so don't discount them. At the same time, don't try to be the expert IC on your team. You're not. If you really want to be an IC, you can always go back. You can switch the ladder and go back as an IC. That's totally respectable. But if you are a manager, stay as a manager. And if it's required, be vulnerable. I remember when I joined Meta, I was struggling to understand this whole privacy world. I went to two people who were really good at this place. One was a manager who reported to me, Charlie. You know Charlie. And the other one was an IC. And I said, okay, I am struggling to understand this. I come from a different world. I want to understand what's happening here. Both of them were so generous, they gave me a couple of hours. Over a period of time, by the way, not the same day. We did whiteboarding session to see what's the story here. Now, without those 2 hours of support from them, I wouldn't have onboarded well at Meta. They gave me very simple explanation, real tactical explanation, no fluff, no extra information, how data flows from mobile app to the application tier, all the way to the database tier and data warehouse. So they gave me a left to right view of the system. Then they recommended some documents. I actually read them before the meeting, after the meeting. I was able to connect the dots because I was willing to ask him. I also realized as I was calibrating with other managers who were onboarding with me in other organizations, I already had a good context compared to other managers. Even within the group, with privacy area, I had more context because I was willing to ask help. Whenever I had dots not connected, I would go ask help, tell me more, I'm curious to learn. In a lunch meeting, coffee meeting, I would take a paper and ask questions and make notes. They loved it, by the way. They felt like a celebrity. All these ICs I was talking to, they were like raised. Tell me more. Okay, ask me more questions. I know that you're liking all this information. I am really liking you as a manager because you want to learn more about my area. So it's a win-win there. So the more I showed interest, the more they shared, the better we became as a manager and employee. It's a win-win, by the way. Win-win for everyone. Win for the organization, win for me as a manager, win for them as team members. Because I know the context now. I can represent the entire team really well in higher level of meetings. Because I am the messenger, right? So I'm not the messenger, I'm the messenger. So I need to carry the right message from the team to represent them in all these decision meetings.
Awesome. Yeah, the culture I have experienced as individual contributor, IC or engineer at Meta is great culture of collaboration and ownership and like having people with great talent and also like humble people. Like as you mentioned is if you ask for help, what I have experienced is it could be IC senior, it could be IC junior, it could be tech lead. They're always generous, my experience, most of the time, or always they're generous to share their time and wisdom and knowledge to help you onboard faster, to help you unblock faster. And creating this culture is hard. I think like creating cultures like this is top 1%. I can say, and it is basically hard to scale it to 60,000 people, for example, at Meta or Google. And another point that I really liked is being able to be okay with good enough, as opposed to being perfectionistic view for yourself or for your team. And I really like, as an engineer, I really like to have this freedom of having failures and learning and asking for help. And it is opposite of like imposter syndrome, that you're in a new environment. The most challenging part joining in a team, especially if it is upskill, it's out of your comfort zone, is the first 3 months for onboarding. You have a lot of uncertainty, you have a lot of challenges. If you don't ask, I had these experiences in my first experiences in the industry. I was not willing to ask a lot of questions. I was struggling with imposter syndrome, with anxiety. And so all of these things I have learned throughout the years to apply the opposite approach, to asking for help, to be humble if I don't know all the answers. Thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah, and it has to be paid forward as well, right? So as other people are coming and joining and onboarding, we help them and say, how do I help? I can offer 30 minutes every month or every 2 weeks as you're onboarding. Ask me any question you have. I will either answer it or point to the document which can answer that question, or to the person who can help you. And it's also some things on the recipient, right? So they have to read the documents. They have to be lightweight, not heavyweight. Meaning, if I send one link to read, they should be able to read and get all the information. So make it easy on the other side so that they can help you.
Absolutely, yeah. Another good point is basically like, especially in this fast-paced environment, having a short documentation. Luckily, now we have like ChatGPT everywhere. We can put all the 1 million pages of the wikis and documents and ask ChatGPT, or at Meta, it's called MetaMate, to give us answer in TLDR, in one paragraph or bullets. I usually ask them, give me bulleted outline. But yeah, as you mentioned, I'm curious as you bring that point. So how helpful it is? Is it answering 80% of your questions? Oh, in terms of like using ChatGPT or MetaMate for answering the questions? That's right, yes. So I can tell my first-hand experience going to Meta for the second time is, previous time, it was, at the beginning for my onboarding, it was so hard because like Meta has millions of pages as wiki, which the search engine was not good to search for your answer. One thing that I had learned in my previous experience with Meta 2023, it was like asking from the forums. A real person could solve my problems and unblock me. Fast forward 1 year later, after introducing a new product, MetaMate, which is a version of ChatGPT at Meta, totally significantly different story. Now, every question that I have that previously I couldn't find in wikis and documents, and a real person I had to pay for a response, like it usually takes hours to get unblocked. Now MetaMate consumes all the data from like 10 years of millions of documents and give me the correct answer. Most of the time, more than 90%, it is the right answer. If not, I query and prompt more. So it's really helpful. Yeah. 90% is a good rate. It will help people to be productive, more productive, and less need to ask other people. 90% effectiveness for this basically GPT AI responses, LLM responses, and also latency, like the time to get to your answer. Previously, on average, 3 hours, 2 hours, I was waiting for someone to see my problem in some technology, for example, in my field was data engineering, to get me the correct answer, 3 hours, 4 hours. Now within like 10 minutes with different prompts, I can go to the direction to unblock myself. So huge advancement. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I learned something today. Let's go back to our original topic. We had TAL and the last L is pending. The last L out of tall is leadership growth loop. This is the week 4 theme of setting up a loop for leadership growth. I am a big fan of Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. I don't know if you have seen my book. It is endorsed by Dr. Goldsmith here, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. So he wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. If you have not read the book, anybody who is listening to this, please read the book. He has so many videos on YouTube explaining the concept of stakeholder leadership coaching, as well as a concept called feed forward. In week number 4 is all about Goldsmith's philosophy. I teach everything I know from 2007. I read his book in 2007. And for the last 17 years, I've used it in my career, my coaching, everywhere. And finally, it's so glad to have his endorsement on my book. So I'm really grateful to Marshall Goldsmith for his support. In this theme of leadership development, we look at a framework called stakeholder-centered leadership coaching. It's a mouthful. Let me explain. So the whole concept is leadership is a contact sport. You are a leader in the context of people around you. Think of this. You are a data engineer, a senior engineer on data team, and there are other people with you from data science, product management, software engineering, mostly those 3, but you might work with the TPM and maybe other functions from privacy team. If there are 6 to 8 people around you who are always watching you, you are impacted by their work, they are impacted by your work and your communication style. I call them stakeholders based on Goldsmith's philosophy. You can call them cross-functional partners in Meta's words, but let's stick to stakeholders right now. The stakeholder is also your manager, by the way. It could be your skip level manager. You identify your key stakeholders and you start the development process from there. The most important part of this philosophy is that you don't mix up performance and leadership growth together. What I don't like in organizations is they do this 360 feedback along with the appraisal. I wish they split up. They cover leadership growth as separate and your performance as separate. For example, a data scientist can give you feedback on your performance that quarter. But the leadership growth has to be separated. You can do more cycles of leadership growth. That's okay. You can do quarterly, by the way. Because you can change your behavior. Let's say you are not listening well. Why do you want to wait until 6 months or 12 months for somebody to tell you you're not listening? Either they can tell you directly one-to-one. In some cases, they cannot. It's based on their background. Right? Folks from Asia and other countries are not confrontational. They will not give you direct feedback. People in the West, in the US and a couple of other countries, maybe Canada, people are upfront. They can tell you directly if something is wrong in your behavior. So by having this framework for anonymous feedback, so step 1 is find your stakeholders. Step 2 is gather anonymous feedback as soon as you can and as frequently as you can. Because when you keep it anonymous and your leadership growth, you want the truth. You don't want polished information. You want the raw truth of how do you come across as a leader, as a contributor. And then you can change your behaviors.
Awesome. 3 things I like the most is basically you started by a great book. So there's a quick story I want to share. I had one of the managers I loved working was the manager I had with ACV Auctions. I worked there for 2.5 years. It was one of the first companies that I worked after my graduation, and John Coles. So I kept my basically communication and connection with John Coles. We meet like 2 or 3 times a year. as like I want to learn from him, like the leadership style and all those things. Last year after Meta, I asked him for a book that he recommends me. That is the most favorite book that he has read for the management, because I wanted to go to a startup. I also consulted with you and you shared your great wisdom. One of the books that John Calds recommended me was the What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and there are a lot of great wisdom that also you shared as a summary that also helped me at the beginning when I played the manager role in new environment in the startups. I had challenges, a lot of challenges that I didn't know in advance. Like I have those vulnerabilities or like the area of improvement. I have tried to like improve those areas. But one of the books that you also mentioned was really helpful. Other book, by the way, that was very helpful in those challenging environment was 48 Laws of Power. So for anyone who is upskilling from engineer to a manager role, in some environments the culture is not as good as Meta or as good as, like, for example, ACV Auctions, where my team was. This book helped me a lot. Like I realized that the environment that I am being as a manager or as IC, the culture was challenging. So 48 Laws of Power, we can discuss about that one if you have read or you have some wisdom to share about 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. We can also talk about it in another session. But also like the other points that you mentioned, TAL, and like the leader, every person as a center of the leadership and like this look for improvement. Thank you for those comments and wisdom as well.
Yeah. And the other important aspect of Goldsmith philosophy is you think of feedback as, let's say you're driving your car. You have a big windshield in front of you and you have a small rear view mirror. So rear view mirror is like feedback. It's the past. Windshield is the feed forward. It is the changes you need for the future. So there is some element of feedback is required for leadership growth, which is maybe 10%. But we need more information on what changes do I need to do in the future, because past is gone. I love this philosophy so that people can change. Otherwise, you're investing too much time in digging the past and changing. It's gone. Yesterday history. Let's talk about tomorrow and today. How can I change? How do I change in this meeting now? That's more important than what happened yesterday. You can still apologize and finish it, 10%, that's all. But don't dwell too much on the past. That's why the analogy of feed forward is windshield, not the rear view mirror. Feedback is the rear view mirror.
Another thing that I relate to this one is basically, I remember one of the challenges that I had, for example, last year in the situation that I mentioned was like, move on. As engineer, as you mentioned, for engineers, like focusing on one topic and solving the issue was so critical. When you're moving to the managerial level, at the beginning, it was challenging for me to let it go and move on. Look forward instead of like digging the past or being focused and fixated. And now that I'm looking back, I see that like these are some of the things that I could be better and I am improving in terms of like being able to see the bigger picture, move on and let it go. And sometimes like different things can happen. So,
and for people who have not read the book yet, What Got Here Won't Get You There, you can also Google it. Goldsmith has collected about 20 interpersonal bad habits. Now, Marshall only coaches CEOs, by the way. One level down or CEOs. That's what he coaches from the last 4 decades. He collected the 20 common bad habits, interpersonal bad habits, from all these CEOs and one level down to CEOs. You will be surprised. As you go through the list of 20 bad habits, you will see those bad habits in your meetings. I'll give you a couple of examples. Not listening, interrupting other people, starting every sentence with the no, but, or however. You said this, but. No, it doesn't work. I hear what you say, however. So there are different ways of negativity. And then interrupting other people, speaking when you are angry, making a sarcastic comment. I think this is very common. People think it's a nice thing. May not be at Meta, I'm not saying. But in other organizations I have heard that I have seen as well, people make these sarcastic jokes and comments. They think it's not really troubling people. It doesn't help anybody by the way, being sarcastic or making jokes on people around you. Especially in teams where the ICs are involved, and the more senior you are, you need to stop doing these things. They're all interpersonal, toxic, bad habits. So read them on the internet. He has got his own blog. He has the AI tool, by the way, marshallgoldsmith.ai. You can ask any question. I think it is based on his work, LLM type of query, ChatGPT style. You simply ask a question, it gives you a response. marshallgoldsmith.ai. It's a brilliant tool, by the way. So if you don't like reading books, it's a great way to ask a question and get some response. How do I improve my leadership skills? How do I improve my bad habits? What are some of the behavioral triggers I can use to improve myself? So in the last week of my program, we talk about feed forward, we talk about anonymous feedback from people, stakeholder-centered leadership coaching, and then setting the environment, setting the triggers for new behaviors. I will give you an example. I was coaching somebody, a manager, who had this bad habit of interrupting people and starting every answer with no. For some reason, he had developed this habit. You say to him anything in a meeting, he would say no, and then start his answer. No, and his answer. You know what happens after some time? If you say every answer with a no and then a response, people don't like it. The word no is not useful. Our brain gets alerted when you hear the word no. And his 360 feedback gave him this feedback that, okay, you use a lot of no, you are not listening to people, you interrupt people, you have to change this behavior. He said, how do I change? It has become a habit now. How do I change? One of the ideas from the book, and there are so many other ideas from his other books, by the way, like Mojo is another book, Trigger is another book, wonderful book by Marshall Goldsmith. One of the techniques we did with him, this manager, is you tell your team, going forward, in team meetings, if I ever start a sentence with no, ask me $10, I'll pay you right away. Now, you might think $10 is nothing, but wait, what happened? You wait and watch this. So, in a couple of meetings, he started. Within 15 minutes, he lost about $50. Because he said no, $10 per mistake. He did 5 mistakes. 5 times he said no. So now, after 5, he doesn't want to lose any more money. He's become more conscious now. All of a sudden, he wants to answer and he doesn't say no. This is a trick. These are all behavioral triggers we can use to improve our behavior. Set the environment in a place, set the observer effect so that you change because you're being observed by people around you. Just one example how these ideas can help.
Yeah, so I like the gamifying aspect of it.
And people loved it, by the way, because now he is vulnerable. He said, okay, I want to change my behavior. Hey team, help me. So now he is creating the safety in this organization. I have developed some habits I want to change, help me. Gamifying it and helping everybody through his learning. I just wish more people do it consistently and consciously, because it's okay to ask help. It is okay to change. You're not perfect. You're not really a model that everybody has to follow you. You can change. And everybody needs to change. Nobody's perfect.
It reminds me of one of the games that we used to play in one of the companies that I was working. It was a great culture. And we had this game that if you come to the meeting more than 2 minutes late, you have to buy some sweets or donuts for a whole team.
I like it.
Gamifying habits. That is, I have final question on my side, which is throughout these basically experiences and like the courses and working with many people in communication and leadership, finding the flaws or the areas of improvement in our communication or leadership skill. which part is the hardest? Being aware, in this example, I'm using this example, the manager that you mentioned. The first step is to be aware that he has this area of improvement. He is not listening. He is starting most of the time by no. Being aware is the hardest part, or being able to like change this habit.
I'll give you two answers, by the way. You asked me the hardest challenge. I'll come back to that later. Hardest challenge I have seen in people, especially in leadership. I'll come back to that question later. Coming to the change part, both are challenging. Most people are not aware, and people cannot give you this direct feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Even at companies like Google and Meta, I have seen the higher people are at those levels, they don't get these kinds of feedback. There's a nice analogy is that, let's say you're talking to a VP of your organization, you're having lunch, and the VP has a spinach on his teeth. It's a metaphor, by the way, spinach on his teeth. Would you tell that to him and say there's spinach and remove it? You may say, it's okay, it doesn't matter, it's fine. Just an example. Same thing with other things. Any bad habits you've developed and we are not listening, interrupting, the higher we are in the organization, we don't know the feedback. So the awareness itself is a big challenge. The lower you are, you might know. So people may tell you directly. Even big companies, I've seen the higher people are, they don't listen. They interrupt. They make sarcastic comment. I will not mention the company names. But I have seen. So this whole notion of the higher you go, you don't need to improve is a fallacy. It's the opposite. The higher you go, the more mindful you need to be. What mistakes I'm making? What silly comments I'm passing in meetings? Am I aware of cultural boundaries? Am I saying something that may offend somebody from this culture? This awareness is required as they go higher in the organization. So awareness is always a gap. Second one is this process of stakeholder-centered coaching. There is something called as follow-up, which means you meet your stakeholders every month for 10 to 15 minutes and say, I want to change this behavior. What have you noticed in the last 1 month? What have I done well? What I could do better in the next month? This is called as follow-up. So you get the feedback first, you find the stakeholders, get the anonymous feedback, pick 3 items you want to change, maybe 2 items you want to change. Work with those stakeholders to say, you don't know who gave what feedback, by the way. You corrected the summary, but you're telling them, I am working on this. I want to become a better listener or better planner, better communicator. How am I doing in the last 1 month? How can I do better in the future? This step is called follow-up. This is the hardest thing to do in leadership development. You know the reason. It's ego. The follow-up, going and say, hey, let's say I'm in your team, I am your manager. And me coming to you and say, hey, Masood, as you know, I've been working on my listening skill. I want your observation in last 1 month. Did I do well in my listening skills? If not, what else I could do better? That requires tremendous amount of humility to me to come to you and ask you that question. So the discipline to meet you every month and the humility to ask your help and observation.
Great points and great wisdom, and I really enjoyed the conversation, the long conversation and very insightful conversation. So many great things that I genuinely I have learned. Some of the things that you mentioned that reminds me of my learnings over the past 2 years. Some of them were even new, like some of the abbreviations that could be helpful, some of the things that is fallacy or common mistakes that is, for example, like being sarcastic. And I think I have experienced myself, or I have seen some other people using sarcastic tone or like phrases that I have realized after that event that it was not helpful. It was not impactful. I didn't intend to be like a bad impact, but after effect, I realized that it was not good.
I also have seen this at Meta too. ICs had a conflict because of this sarcastic comment. So it's not, big companies. People think that all these big companies don't have this challenge. Human beings are everywhere. Wherever we have human beings, there is interpersonal challenge. It doesn't matter which company or which level.
Again, awareness for me, like I have learned that awareness is the most important thing when I want to improve in something that it used to be my blind spot. So if I learn, for example, one new experience that I have learned like over the past 3 months is in challenging and stressful situation, being able to like keep the temper down. In the team, it was challenging for me, like for some incidents, but I'm trying to be aware first of all that the excitement is not bad, but it is not preferred. It's preferred to be stoic and calm and compose. So those are some of the strategies that we can also spend another session for stoic behaviors at work. As a manager or as a leader, we share great learnings. So
and people who are listening, if you are interested to dig deeper, you can either take my digital course. I'll send you the link, Masood, later. It's I think about a 6-hour course on all these 4 themes: talking, asking questions, listening, and leadership. And people who want to come to my live course, I conduct twice a year. The next course is starting on 3rd of September. It's a 4-week course, Tuesdays and Thursdays on maven.com. I'll send you the link as well. I'll send you a link with 20% discount if somebody wants to join. I'm happy to have them in the course. You will meet a lot of other engineers and managers from Oracle, Amazon, and a few other companies, GE Healthcare, Wipro, and many other software companies as well. So I strongly recommend consider coming to the live course. You meet a lot of people, experiment all these ideas. You will learn how to give feedback by giving feedback. You need to do it. You need to lift the dumbbell a few times to see how the muscle feels. So I really enjoyed the conversation, Masood. It's again, I love to continue this conversation to see how else we can help people, how other ideas I can bring to the table from my experience as a practitioner, as well as a coach and an instructor. How do I add value to your community? Let me know.
Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we started this podcast by mentioning one of the comments. Interestingly, it was from 1 hour ago. We had a recording. One of my friends in that podcast mentioned that the most favorite episode for him was your part 1. So my final question is, do you have something in mind for part 3? After 2-3 weeks, we have some topic to continue our conversations, or you want to think about it and let me know after this recording?
One thing that comes to my mind immediately is we could talk about one of these 2 things. One is how to prepare for job interviews, if that is of interest to your audience. I have a framework called 3P: prepare, plan, and perform. I have done it for myself when I was interviewing in 2020 with 20 companies. Most of the big tech interviews I went through with this philosophy of 3P. Now I teach the same thing with the clients, my one-on-one clients. We could cover that. How do I help people prepare for job interviews? The second aspect I could also think of is, in my experience, engineers think they are not good storytellers. I have a live course and a digital course. We could do a mini conversation where I can teach some basic principles of stories and talk about a few stories during the conversation using that framework. So I not only teach the framework in this conversation with you, I will narrate 3 to 4 stories from my own life and career and experience using that framework. How does that sound?
I love both of them. Let's go with the order that you mentioned, because I have received many comments about the hardship of finding and landing the first job in this challenging job market. So let's go with part 3. And by part 4 is also I see that is very important, especially for those that they are performing as engineer but they want to up skill, like they want to go senior, or they want to go to be tech lead or manager. So let's go part 3 and part 4 like this. But I have one suggestion as well, which is like I would like to invite curious and interested guests and ask questions, like for the third topic, which is like finding the job and job interview, like the 3P approach that you mentioned. One or two or three other guests who will have questions they can ask live from you, and it would be like a group podcast, more impactful. And I enjoy having like those real answers. So what do you think?
I like the idea. I have not done this before, sort of a group session, people asking questions, and I'm happy to do it. I've done it on storytelling, but not on the interview conversation. So I'm always up for a new challenge. Sign me up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. So many great things in the past 1 hour and 20 minutes. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. We will be in contact very soon.
I will have one last sentence before we go. For folks who are listening, please remember, what got you here won't get you there. Please remember that the more you are aware about what's the gap in your behaviors and leadership, the more you bridge the gap, the more fulfilling career you will have and more impact, because you have fixed the gaps as a person, as an individual. And we all can do it.
I have experienced this sentence, what got Masood here, like in the past, I'm talking about Masood 2 years ago, won't got me 2 years forward. So 100%. I love the last sentence you mentioned, and thank you so much again. Hope to see you very soon.
Thank you. I enjoyed. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.